Hi, Gene Monterastelli here, the editor of tappingqna.com. The video that you are about to watch is a conversation that was a part of this year's 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping is a fundraiser for the amazing work that is done by the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network has brought tapping to migrants, refugees, prisoners, and the underprivileged in over 30 countries all over the world. As you watch this video, if you learned something, if you were touched by it, if you were inspired by it, the easiest way to say thank you is to support the work of the Peaceful Heart Network. To do that, all you need to do is go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support. And as you look in the description and the first comment down below, you will see a direct link to that. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Next up is a conversation with my buddy Steve Wells. Steve is a leadership coach and a peak performance consultant from Perth, Western Australia. He is a pioneer in energy psychology and has been teaching and researching energy psychology techniques for the past 25 years. He conducted the first randomized control trial of EFT for treating specific phobias. Here is my conversation with Steve on overcoming anxiety using intention tapping. Interested whenever I'm working with someone, interviewing someone. I love understanding the vocabulary that people use so that we can have a common conversation about what's going on. And all of us have experienced anxiety, and we say I'm anxious, and we say I'm nervous, and all of that sort of stuff. Before we just kind of step in and talk about tapping and intention tapping and responding to this, how do you define, how do you think about, what are you responding to when you're talking about, hey, we're doing something for anxiety?
Okay, so a lot of people confuse fear and anxiety. And that's because the feelings are similar. And but fear is a life-saving thing. Fear is actually your automatic response to a real threat, and it'll save your life. You know, you have a capacity, your unconscious, I will call it, is much more aware than your aware conscious mind, and it will pick up that there's a threat before you're even consciously aware of it and energize you to be able to fight, fight, flee, freeze, whatever you need to do to be able to deal with that situation. The difference with anxiety is it kind of piggybacks on those feelings, but the threat is not necessarily present, okay? In fact, the threat is not normally present. It's the prediction of a threat, the projection of a threat, the mind-created fantasy of a threat. Now, it may also come because you have had a real threat happen to you, like you had a trauma happen to you, you had a bad experience, and now the mind, to save you from suffering that again, has kind of got remembering how that feels. And so anything that looks like you might be going into that thing in any way, it's going to go, hey, remember how this felt? And it can project those feelings into the future. So your mind is capable of projecting images of the future. It does it all the time, and it does it to save you. And the mind, people talk about the mind being negative. It's not actually. It's what's kept us alive. The mind making projections of the future is one aspect of anxiety. But that's not what causes the anxiety. It's when you attach to that. So, for example, if you've had a threat, then, of course, you can have those feelings already attached to that. So you have the thought about, I failed over here. Well, I have this thing where it's another assessment situation or another performance. I might fail again. So your mind is going to naturally do that to kind of go, hey, this might happen. How do you, how are you going to cope with this? Get prepared, all that stuff. But because it's got the feelings attached to it, now you're suffering something that's not really happening. And your mind is projecting the past failure into the future, and you're basically living in the past. So you've got to update your nervous system and say, hey, that happened in the past. That doesn't, now you can do that. People try to do that with cognitive therapy. Well, Try to talk yourself into it when you're dealing with the feelings. We do it with tapping, of course. And with intention tapping, we release what I would call the emotional attachments to that. So who's the guy who wrote Self-Image Psychology? Anyway, he said your mind and your nervous system can't tell a difference between something that you vividly imagine and something that's real. So it's going to react as if that's real.
Yeah.
I see it a little bit like you are capable of attaching to that so you can step into the image of that and feel it as if it's happening to you. But if you look at it from outside, you can go, well, yeah, that might happen, but it probably won't. See? So you're not attached to it emotionally.
And so what it sounds like you're saying is that it's almost like anxiety was an adaptive behavior after fear. So first we learned fear. Fear is, how do I notice danger in this scenario? Anxiety is the ability to predict danger in the future. It becomes problematic when it's disproportionate, it's misinformed, or it becomes this thing that is defining us in the moment. So it's like, it's good that like I have, like this, like in my mind, there's a difference between distress and eustress, that sense of like Christmas Eve, or I'm about to give a presentation and I'm being anxious about what is coming in front of me. That is an energizing thing if I'm about to step onto stage, or if there might be something difficult today. It's good that I'm thinking about it. It becomes problematic when it's too much. We're stuck in the future and all of those sorts of things. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
Well, anxiety can come from, be adapted from the real thing. It can also attach. This is the thing. Your mind can create all kinds of attachments. So it can attach, like you had that problem. Well, this can also be a problem. That can also be a problem. It can also be a problem. This can also be a problem. So it can attach to things that have nothing to do with what happened to you before as well. And so suddenly you're projecting failure in every situation when it was really just that particular one. The other thing is a lot of what people, a lot of people will say in that situation you give as an example that, it's good to feel anxious in order to perform. But that's because most people have never actually been able to perform without anxiety. So they assume that the anxiety is good for them. And, and you get told to do all kinds of things like, tell yourself it's excitement, It isn't. I know the difference between excitement and anxiety. And sometimes I have a bit of both, okay? And what I can tell you now is that the anxiety is not necessary. It's not really actually helpful. Now, of course, telling you that doesn't change anything, because it's like saying don't worry. Never in the history of people being told not to worry have people not worried.
No one has ever relaxed at the word relax. That just doesn't happen. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why we have tapping. And the reason why is because there's always a body component going on here. So, as you know, we learned EFT. My friend Dr. David Lake and I learned EFT from Gary Craig, and then we adapted it and we use a simpler version of tapping. And so we do away with setup statements, and we basically get people to notice whatever they're noticing and follow it. And so we use an acceptance-based approach. This is really powerful with anxiety, because anxiety is all about not accepting. You don't want to show you're anxious. You don't want to feel anxious. You don't want to have anxiety. You don't want those feelings in your body, so you'll do anything not to have those feelings and not to show those feelings. So this is actually accepting and allowing what's there, noticing what's there, adding the tapping to its presence, and not trying to make it go away, because when you try to push it away or force it away, you're actually creating the resistance. And the resistance is what stops things from flowing. And I believe your feelings are meant to flow, your energy is meant to flow, your energy is meant to move. And this is what happens, like when you've had a trauma that you haven't got over it, there's a disruption in flow, and unless that flow is allowed to process all the way through, then you never get over the thing, and then you're still feeling the fear forever. You're suffering post-traumatic stress and so on.
And as you say that part that resists, one of the things that I often think about is fully articulated emotions are short-lived. And so giving ourselves like that sense of flow of, instead of going, oh, I don't want to get into this. It's like, great, I want to notice what this thing is so I can learn from it. I can respond from it. I can be informed by it. I can transform it. It's not like I can't just turn it off. I need to engage with it in some particular way.
Yeah. And so, your thing about the performance, it is actually a good thing to say, all right, I'm having this feeling. I'm not going to, I'm going to accept that I'm having this triggered reaction, and that it is a triggered reaction that I'm having, that may have come from all these things. That's a far better thing, because that acceptance, the research in neuroscience shows that if you accept and allow the emotions without having to try to push them away, then the stress centers in the brain tend to settle down, and you tend to have that happening less. But we also can use tapping to inform the nervous system that you're actually safe, that this is not a real threat, that this is actually, you won't die. And just because you had a problem in the past, that doesn't mean that you're going to have this problem now. So we just simply tap on the same points that they use in EFT, and we have people tap on those continually while they're noticing whatever it is that's happening in their mind, in their thoughts, and whatever's happening in their body. So that's what we call simple energy techniques. And I use
and I want to stick a pin in that before we start talking about the more sophisticated stuff. So the website I run is Tapping Q&A. And the single most common question I get is, what are the tapping phrases for insert issue? And it could be a whole host of things. And phrases are a powerful thing, but I think that we can get really, really hung up with trying to find the right reframe and the right transformation, and just tuning in and noticing while we're tapping. And so for everybody who is, particularly folks who are newer to tapping, I want you to hear that really loud and clear, that just like Steve's saying here, just noticing and tapping, that's tuning in.
What's happening. So if I just tune into my body right now, I can notice wherever there's some tension, and I can just put my attention on that tension and just do the tapping. And without trying to make something happen, I just put my attention on it and use the mindful approach to notice what happens next and allow it to move. And sometimes it moves in terms of location. Sometimes it gets stronger before it actually moves out or moves through and stuff like that. And if you can bear with that and allow it to do that, then the feelings will move, because that's what they're meant to do. And then you're no longer stuck, and you can go with the flow, and you can deal with what happens. And same thing with your thoughts. You can just let the thoughts be there. And one of the problems with anxiety is you get fixated on certain thoughts, and certain thoughts, you kind of get hypnotized by them, like hooked into responding in certain ways. And anxiety is often just things going in a loop. Okay. So in the approach I call intention tapping, we want to release the emotional attachment to that. Now, that's what tapping does. So tapping can do that. And then these particular intentions I discovered can also do that. The other thing, so there's the mind part. You have what I would call the emotional attachment. There wouldn't be a problem unless you had emotion attached to that thought. So you think that thought, I'm going to fail, they'll all laugh at me. And there's a reaction, okay? There's a reaction in the body. If you didn't have some kind of emotional reaction or reaction in the body, some kind of tension or tightness or stress, there wouldn't be the problem. You could think that thought and say, well, no, I'm not. It just doesn't bother you. So we do tapping. We focus on that thought that upsets us. Now the same thought just doesn't upset us. All right, well, I've discovered a way of using intention to do that, which is also exceedingly effective and reliable, works consistently for many, many people, and people are using it all over the world. And so these tensions are simply about releasing emotional attachments and restoring energy flow. And so you combine that with just noticing what's going on and doing that. But I should have said, with the tapping, a lot of people in EFT are using the upper body points now. Now, you're not going to walk in, do your talk and be tapping on your face, right? You're not going to do your performance and be doing that. You can, gently rub or touch the points. But you can use the finger points that a lot of people have forgotten about with tapping. And, in EFT, we learned about tapping on them like this. And, through David Lake, actually, Larry Nims had a process of using the thumb to tap on one or a couple of the points when he was teaching us his technique. So David said, well, let's just incorporate that. And so now we get people to use the thumb to tap on the side of each of the finger points. And this is portable. And this is one of the great things about anxiety. It's not the great things about anxiety. It's the great thing about that you can use this with anxiety, because a lot of the times it's happening when you're out in public or in a situation where you have to perform or where people can see you. This can be done discreetly. And so you can just gently tap on these points, and you can also just rub on them if you're thinking that the tapping itself is a little indiscreet. And that can be soothing and calming your nervous system as you go. So I can be tapping here, under the screen.
So for me, if I have my hands under the table, I'm doing that where it's actually getting all of them at once, where I can just be completely out of sight. Now, obviously, if I'm standing up, I'm not doing that. But if I'm sitting at a table like this or out of a screen, I'm getting all 5 of those points simultaneously because I'm doing them on both hands as I'm just doing it in that particular way.
I used to sit on the airplane, doing a flight, and I thought I'll just, go through some of my issues. And I was listening to the music and I'm just tapping on these points like this,
Right.
But I've twice been sitting next to someone on the airplane who was just doing this themselves. And I inquired. One of the guys didn't know the technique at all. He just was absolutely just tapping on the points. And the other guy actually knew tapping and had learned about it. And so he was using it for self-soothing. So you can also do it, like I could do it.
Absolutely. All the core, pondering and thinking like that,
people naturally do these kind of things, for self-soothing, and you can do that too. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like a baby is not taught to suck its thumb. It just knows that sucking its thumb is self-soothing. Once you recognize where the points are, we start to recognize, or something like havening, where people are, when they're anxious, they're like, rubbing themselves in this way. And that's because it is actually soothing in that particular way. And so, naturally drawing ourselves to this point, it's good to point that out as we're thinking about anxiety, that sometimes we have the opportunity to do something comprehensive where we're going to do something like the intention tapping we're going to talk about. But also, if you're in the moment, covertly, taking the side of your hand and just tapping it on your thigh. Think of these ways that we can take these points so you could very easily and discreetly get to them in a public setting.
And the tapping itself is very powerful. And if you can, we talk about grafting the tapping to where the problem occurs. So you'd literally take this into the situation where the problem occurs. Now, of course, it's great. You can sit at home and imagine it. And for most people, just thinking about it will bring up the anxiety. And so they can do tapping like this at home, and they don't have to worry about, tapping on their face. I've taught it to some people who don't mind tapping on their face in public and those kind of things. But for most people, it's like, man, oh man, you want to make me anxious? Make me tap on my face in public, So
that's the beautiful thing about living here in New York City. If I'm tapping on a street corner, I'm the fourth weirdest thing that anybody is looking at. So I'm not even noticed.
Well, and it's so well known now. So a lot of people know that. I've actually had a lady contact me because a friend of mine who was a CEO, I taught him tapping, and he literally took it into his meetings, and he was telling all of his senior staff to use this. And he was sitting in an airport doing tapping. This lady came up to him and said, "Oh, tapping?" And he's like, "Yeah." And she was a friend of mine, so she called me up and said, "I met this guy."
And I also like this idea you're talking about grafting onto what's going on. So my introduction to tapping, like that's why I tell your story seriously, was I was dealing with my own social anxiety. And so what I did was I did the scariest thing I could think of, which was online dating. And where I lived at the time in Baltimore, the fun neighborhood was about a 25-minute walk away from my apartment. And so literally I would walk down the street to the date. With every single step, I was getting closer and closer to the thing that was scary, connecting with another human and feeling judged in that particular way. And just like walked into the situation as I was doing it. And once I got a block away, I stopped and then did whatever I needed to do. But yeah, it's great for us to think about, particularly for things like anxiety, where it's oftentimes about the thing we are going to be doing in some particular way, recognizing that in small, subtle ways, we can use these tools very subtly to help us in the moment.
Yeah. One of the challenges when people have anxiety is that they think that everybody else doesn't have it. And because a lot of people, even though they're suffering really intense anxiety, they look like they're confident.
That's right.
And so it's not obvious not everybody's anxiety is on show. Underneath, they're paddling like crazy and really stressed. And I have had anxiety. I've had anxiety my whole life. And even when I learned tapping, there were some things that I didn't seem to be able to really get to until I started committing to doing the tapping every day. And so we discovered with our clients, if we got them to do the tapping, we got them to do it every day. And some of them we encourage them to do like just as much as you can and link it to your routines. And don't try and be clever, just do the tapping itself. You don't even have to do the tapping focusing on a problem. You can just do the tapping and it will tune and tone your nervous system and bring down your anxiety and bring down your good life, bring up your good life energy. And so we say you can bring down your set point for anxiety. If you just do a bit of it, then maybe it's going to be back tomorrow. But if you do it every day, then you're going to change your overall set point. And that's what worked for me. And so now I know if I don't, it's like if I don't go for my walk for a few days in a row, I start feeling sluggish, If I don't eat well for a few days in a row, I start feeling, sluggish. If I don't tap for a few days in a row, I start feeling stressed about things that weren't stressing me the other day. Okay.
First thing I do every single morning when I sit down at my desk is I set my timer for 5 minutes and I just let my fingers do the walking. And again, it's just not thinking about anything deliberate or whatever. Maybe some ideas pop up and an issue comes up and I might chase that, or an inspiration for the day and I jot it down because I have a pen and paper. But it literally is just until the watch buzzes. I just and it's just, you're absolutely right. It just sets the table so beautifully so that we're in a better resource state stepping into the day. So we're less likely to be anxious about what is coming.
Exactly. So, tapping, of course, graft it to where the problem occurs. Yes, you can do it on the things you're imagining. Yes, take it with you and do it whenever you're not even stressed, because there's often an underlying anxiety. And so, most people are running on a 3 or 4 out of 10 anxiety every day. And so if you're already at a 4 and then you get stressed, now you're at a 9. But if you're down at a 0 or a 1 because you've been doing your tapping, then you get stressed. Maybe it's only a 4 or a 5, and so it's much more manageable.
Absolutely.
So we do, just essentially tapping. It's simple. You do the process. You tap as many times as you want on whatever points, and you keep doing it continually. Then there's the use of intention, and that's something I discovered. Intentions I use are not affirmations, because I've never found affirmations to really work for me. These intentions are not about creating attachments to things that you're not currently, that you don't have or that you want to create. They're actually about releasing attachments that are causing your problems, and that's why I believe they work. I discovered this when I was having a hard time. I won't go into all the details of that, but I was drawn back to Byron Katie's work, and there was a statement, it's not the thought, it's the attachment that causes the suffering. And I'm like, tapping releases the emotional attachment, so the thought no longer stirs you up. And I just had the insight, what if we could use intention? And I formed this simple intention, which I now have used thousands and thousands and thousands of times. I release all my emotional attachments to this problem. And instantly, just a big relief. And, I see this consistently with clients, the practitioners who are using this, just see this with clients. They move through aspects really quickly, and they're able to actually have big quantum shifts on each aspect that they address. Whereas with tapping, you still get there, but you have to sometimes do a lot of it. So, you identify a part of your problem that's upsetting you. It can simply focus on that and just say, I release all my emotional attachments to X, whatever X is.
Mm-hmm.
If you're stressed about your performance, you can say, I release all my emotional attachments to this performance. Now, with anxiety, there's often a projection. There's projections and what I like to call fantasies. In fact, I borrowed that from Willem Lammerts because he says, most of these things are mind-created fantasies. But the difference is that you attach to it, right? But so it's a projection, it's a fantasy. So, of course, your mind is projecting, you failed before, so you're going to fail again. So you can simply say, I release all my emotional attachments to this projection that I'm going to fail. And then you just keep tapping and you let it do whatever it does, and your unconscious does the work. This is the great thing about intention tapping, is that we're not consciously having to think about everything. We're not consciously having to identify what things to tap on. We just notice whatever we notice, and then we apply the intentions to that. Now, if you notice a disturbance in the body, as I did when I was having this trouble and when I made the discovery, after I'd done released some attachments to some of my problems, I felt this tightness in my chest, and I thought, there's always something happening in the body, okay? And sometimes we're fixated in the mind, and so we're not aware of what's going on in the body. But if there wasn't something going in the body, you wouldn't have a problem, okay? The feelings are felt in the body. Feelings move in the body. Disturbances occur in the body. And so that's where you're feeling stressed. You can't be stressed unless you're feeling it, right? So again, I realized with tapping, we use tapping to restore the flow because there's a disturbance in flow, a blockage often. Sometimes it's a balance issue, but it's usually a blockage. And again, I just had this insight. What if we could use intention? So I just formed this simple intention. I restore the right energy flow to my chest. And then I just let it do it, whatever. And I wasn't tapping at the time, by the way. I just spontaneously had this beautiful deep breath. And I'm like, I'm just feeling clear. Like the problem, essentially from releasing a few emotional attachments with intention only and restoring energy flow with intention only. And I was feeling good. Now, I never did that with any other kind of intentions I'd used. None of those things. I've been trying thousands of things like this my whole life, any way I could to make myself better, and this just worked. And it works consistently. So now, those two fundamental core intentions that we use, and I originally called this intention-based energy process, IEP, and now I combine the intentions or the intention process with tapping, and I call it intention tapping because that's just a nice name. And so the intentions that we use are, I release all my emotional attachments to this problem, I restore the right energy flow to this body area that's disturbed, or I restore the right energy flow to this feeling. See, one of the problems with anxiety is it's a feeling that we don't want to feel, okay? And therefore, we don't want to allow it to be in our bodies. We just want to get rid of it, like it burns, take it away kind of thing, So so you have this feeling, let's say you're feeling, butterflies in your stomach, which is very common with people with anxiety, is to have a stomach feeling or a chest feeling. It's generally somewhere in the midline. And so you have this butterflies in your stomach because you're about to get up and, meet a group or meet a person or perform or whatever. And you simply say, I restore the right energy flow to my stomach. Now, combine that with tapping. And so you simply tap, you simply notice, and you just use the simple intention. I restore the right energy flow to my stomach. And then you just notice. Just let it do whatever it does and just notice what happens.
So would you be willing to lead me through some of that right now, just so we can all do it as a community?
Yeah. Of course. And if you're a human like I am, then you still have issues and challenges and problems and things that you have to get up for. And then even if you're good on something, you go to the next level and up comes the anxiety, So pick a thing.
Great. Yep. So I have a product I'm wanting to launch here in the next couple of months, and it's a bit of a stretch for me. It's a little outside of what I normally do, so it's not exactly what my community is going to be accepting, and so I can just feel a little hesitancy and nervousness around that right now.
The only way you actually move forward is that you actually give yourself these challenges, and that brings up anxiety for 99 out of 100 people on the planet.
Yep.
And so good on you for doing that, because you're stretching yourself. So the first thing is you start tapping, okay? And I'm going to suggest everybody just tap along, because you can borrow benefits from just tapping along and observing this process and just noticing whatever happens for you. And you're like everybody, Jen. You start tapping and it already starts working for you. So like you tap on that point and I could just see just a softening there. Yeah, okay. So doing the product is... Are you aware of a thing? You don't have to be, that worries you about it or brings up anxiety about it?
So yeah, I mean, again, it's just like, people are expecting one thing and it's going to be a little bit different. And so there's just a little concern that, are they going to accept the new thing?
Okay. Just say I release all my emotional attachments.
I release all my emotional attachments.
To people's reaction.
To people's reaction. Instantly stomach unclenched a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. And so you've been doing this so long, you're aware of what's going on in your body,
right?
And so on. So just keep tapping and notice what comes next.
And so what comes next is the same thing, just like it's almost like it's not 100% of the community, it's 30% of the community. So it's like, it's going, oh, there's certain people that are going to come along with me because they've hung out with me for a long time, but there are folks that are newer to following me and my work, and I don't have the rapport with them that I have with my long-term students and clients and podcast subscribers and all those folks.
All right. So just say, I release all my emotional attachments.
All my emotional attachments.
To the projections.
To the projections.
Of all their bad reactions.
Of all the bad reactions.
And again, you just keep tapping and just notice whatever comes next. And don't try and make something happen. Just let it do whatever it does.
And so it's kind of like my stomach did a couple of more somersaults, and then it continued to just kind of dissipate, like it's moving, it's thinning out and moving away.
Yeah. Okay. So you can do this, of course, with aspects like you do with EFT and just notice all the aspects, but we don't have to consciously search for them. We can just notice whatever comes next. And if you're aware of something still happening in the body, like if you put your attention in that area where that, was tense in your stomach, is there still something there?
So there's still a little something in the stomach, and what it is now is it's not worry of judgment. It's now worry of it's not going to be as successful as I would like. So it's not that I'm afraid that I'm going to be judged. I'm now worried that they're going to go, okay. Now just kind of shrug emoji, and it's like I've put all this time and energy into it. It's not hurting my reputation with them, but they're not excited about it.
Okay, so now we could go with either of these. We could go with the feeling in the stomach and restore the energy flow, or we could go with the thought. Now, either way, it works.
Yeah,
you can go with either because they're all part of the same thing, right? That stomach feeling is connected to that thought, and that's what the attachment is. You release the emotional attachment, you restore energy flow. You restore energy flow, you're releasing emotional attachments. So let's go with this.
So what were the let's focus on the physical part because we haven't done that yet. Yeah. So how would we do that?
Well, you simply put your attention, notice what's happening, and just say, I restore.
I restore.
The right energy flow.
The right energy flow.
To my stomach.
To my stomach.
And then you don't have to do anything. You just let your unconscious do whatever it does, and that feeling will move and change and shift or maybe there will be a thought that comes. Whatever is next, you let that just come.
Yeah. And so what happened was it wasn't just that it released, it then literally, it felt like the right energy flowed into that space. And so it was kind of like the anxiety dissipated that created space. And then there's just it's gonna be fun. That's the emotion that goes along with the sense in the stomach is this is actually, not everybody's going to like it. This is going to be fun, and I'm going to find the people who are going to connect with it, is the sensation that's coming with that.
That's what happens, is that you reconnect with your resourceful thoughts, your inner resources, and your reason for doing the thing in the first place.
And it's interesting as we do that, I'm also noticing not just the tension, I'm noticing just a quick kind of sense of chills, kind of like the goosebumpy chill that goes over. And I am now feeling I'm in touch physically with my entire body, not just the tension that was there. One of the things that I notice a lot when I'm tapping on stuff is, I'm either thinking about it a lot, or if I'm tuning into my body, I have a tendency to be waist up in my awareness and not waist down. And so after we had that release, then it was just, and I could feel all of a sudden I felt my feet on the ground again. I was wholly embodied when we gave an opportunity to let the energy flow in that particular way.
Anxiety takes you away from the now into the projection, into the fantasy, into the suffering, into the pain, whatever. And then you do this, it brings you back into the present where you are, which is okay and safe. It's kind of like Sailor Bob Adamson. His book is, what's wrong with right now unless you think about it. Well, actually, nothing, because where you are is safe, right? It's all good. So you just continue this process with whatever's next. And so, we could do it with, I release all my emotional attachments to the shrug, because the thought of them just shrugging and going, well, is that a knife? This is not a knife, that kind of thing. Versus, or with the feeling that connects to that thought of them shrugging. Either way you can work with it. Yeah.
And again, it is slightly more sophisticated than just noticing and tapping, but it doesn't require us to have reframes and insights and memories and all of those are super valuable things. And I use those all the time on myself and my clients, but just as this entry point or as just something that's simple and easy to reach for, a couple of phrases, noticing what's going on, there's going to be benefit. And I think the other thing I think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things is that happens often is we worship at the altar of total relief, and we need to have this all go away for it to be different. But the thing I like about this is there's a tangible difference. It might not be done, but boy, is it different, and boy, am I more present. There's a tangible difference. It's better even if I'm not.
3 statements. We did 3. We did 2 emotional attachments and 1 restore energy. We could keep going. We've done 5 minutes, yes, total relief is possible, but every bit of freedom is a bit more freedom. And so, of course, as you know, some problems have lots of aspects to them. Some problems, are going to require persistence and all that kind of stuff. But this is the simple self-help version, and it's really powerful. So, of course, practitioners can, there are other statements. There's following energy, learning to pay attention, all those kinds of things. We talk about using heart energy when we work with our clients. There's a far more sophisticated process behind this for those who want to be practitioners. But when you use it with yourself, I'm I can't remember more than a couple of things, for goodness sake. So just.
And the other thing is also,
I don't want to be a psychologist for myself. I just want to work on my problem,
And the other thing is when I'm tapping on my own, it's requiring me to be in a resource state where I can guide myself through something. and it's the reason why I have a practitioner. Like I'm really good at this. I work with clients all the time, and I recognize that I need help and guidance and safe space. And when I'm doing stuff on my own, I love doing stuff that's really simple, that doesn't require me to think a great deal. So I can just be present to, because the reason why I'm tapping right now is I'm poorly resourced, and I'm trying to transform this resource. I'm trying to downregulate what's going on. And so having a simple approach makes the most sense when I'm doing stuff by myself.
Exactly. You don't have to be clever. You don't have to be your own therapist. You just have to notice whatever you're noticing. And then if you're willing to just tap and then just notice and follow and allow whatever's happening to be happening. And of course, then you have a reaction. You go, okay, well, I release all my emotional attachments to this, and then just let it do whatever it does, and then follow. Then you notice, okay, I've got this thing happening in my diaphragm. I restore the right energy flow to my diaphragm. Just keep tapping and keep following, keep allowing, and it can move some really interesting places, and you can move some big stuff. I always say, you might save yourself 20 years of therapy, then you only have 10 left. Okay.
That's right. Awesome, Steve. Well, as always, I appreciate your insight, but more so, I appreciate simple, deliberate, real world things that you've discovered from your own experience. That this isn't theoretical stuff, and it's so easy and it's so accessible for us. So thanks so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Yeah, no, look, I like things that work, and I've spent most of my life trying to change things in myself. So I find something that works, I want to share it. So yeah, and thank you for giving us the vehicle to be able to share some of this with people so it can help. Yeah.
Excellent. Another fabulous. If you found this interview inspiring, I would encourage you to support the Peaceful Heart Network by going to 24hoursoftapping.com/support or clicking the link in the description. And you will see on the screen right now a playlist to all of the interviews from this year's and last year's 24 Hours of Tapping. I hope you enjoy those as well.